Yeah, I have to say, I think you're right on the money with that because I could not. Well, when I was a kid going to Comic Cons, and I was a kid in like the mid '90s, right when I first started going to them, and I could
So it was
remember.
better.
Well, I can remember going to a Comic Con back then, and it was just in like a small warehouse, or it was like a little convention center, if that, community
Yeah.
space, and there was about 10 tables with a bunch of long boxes, and people are just digging through, grabbing stuff, and I go to, cause I write for an independent comic company now, and I go to the Comic Cons today, and it's like night and day. It is crazy how the nerd culture just kind of took over the mainstream. I mean, Revenge of the Nerds, in my mind, wasn't just a movie; it was, a cultural trend that just kind of took off as we moved into this technological age.
Yeah, and I think that's like the bell at the door is Revenge of the Nerds, which is a great movie if anybody's ever seen it. I mean, I think he actually ends up by like screwing the girl in the funhouse wearing a Darth Vader mask, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So I mean, it's all everything's relative. Like I went to my first San Diego Comic Con in 1993, and I remember it was the largest comic book convention in the world. It had 25,000 people show up. And you think about that today, and it's like, what the fuck? And I've been to all the New York Comic Cons, and on the weekend there's 160,000 people. It's almost like too many. It's too big. I like those long box conventions. I still go to a few. There's a couple. They have one that's been going on for like 25 years, and it literally is like stepping back into like 1987 because just long boxes. You know.
Yeah, yeah, long boxes as far as the eye can see, but I don't know, man. There's just something about the hunt, when you just dive into a long box. You don't know what you're gonna
Yeah.
find, but there could be something out there, and it just makes you, I don't know, it kind of gives you that excitement. Not to go back to the Christmas morning analogy, but it makes you feel that, like, what's behind the wrapping paper kind of excitement, that you could find something that's just gonna light up your day. But I guess let me ask you, why do you think people are, particularly nowadays, with the takeover of nerd culture, why do you think people are so interested in it now? Like, what do you think it was about that cultural shift that made it so pertinent to
Well,
modern
I,
day?
I think it's been corporatized monetarily. So in the old days, mom and pops would set up at shows, and and you see this. You go to a Wizard, you see the trend of the vendors. So those mom and pops are fewer and fewer and fewer, unless you've got 2,500, $3,500 to set up. You can't afford it. So a lot of corporations have emerged, comic book companies, toy manufacturers, NECA. The perfect example is Super 7. Brian, and I've known Brian for 35 years. I knew him when he had nothing. He actually took the ideas of like his childhood and turned them into reality and produces action figures that I think are second to none. In that whole realm of producing figures. NECA's very similar. They go out and they get certain characters, licensing, and they produce great figures. Pop, Funko. Funko, a lot of people don't know this. They've been around probably for 25 years now. They
Really?
originally started off doing, yeah, they started off doing Nodders in the 90s. So they had a whole like run, and the Nodders got really hot and popular. And then the market crashed for whatever reason. I don't know, mismanagement. They just became unpopular, and the company took a deep dive. And then this other guy came in and bought the company, keeping the original owner on staff. And they came up and developed this idea of the pop, which was, originally was just a single based character figure with, they would relicense, but they wouldn't augment the mold itself. Those original ones all pretty much are alike. And then they got the idea of, all right, we're going to make this one with wings, and this one with, flowing hair, and this one with a crown, and diversified. Now, a lot of people on my side of the fence, since I'm really a vintage collector, I probably own 6 pops, a couple of Astro Boys, a Cybermen, Lemmy from Overhead, Joey Ramone. That's probably all I own because it's not my thing. I collect vintage, I collect vintage stuff. But, going back and looking at Beanie Babies, which are like the curse of whatever era that was, late 90s, early 2000s, worthless to a degree. And although I see sometimes somebody tries to sell them for a lot of money, but, a lot of people ask me, well, aren't Pops going to become Beanie Babies? And I go, no. And I'll tell you why. And the reason why is because of the diversification of characters. At least they refresh themselves. They're always putting the refresh button. So something new comes out, Stranger Things, or, whatever it is, the next Star Wars movie. They get the licensing, they do new characters. So there's always a buyer coming in who wants to buy that stuff. And I think, it's going to saturate the market to the point where my local toy show that we do every month, there's a certain percentage, 15 to 22% are pop guys, and that's a lot of percentage, but it doesn't affect me because I don't deal in that market. And those guys are fighting each other. You walk around the room and there's maybe 8 dealers and all of them have at least one figure that's common to all 8 dealers, at least one. Yeah. One guy's for $5, one guy's for $6. The other guys are like, 2 for 10 or whatever the price is. And it's crazy. And that's where, it affects it. So, in the future, the next time you go to New York Comic Con or Wizard World Chicago or San Diego Comic Con, you're going to see huge, pop dealers. We'll take up that marketplace where mom and pops, fathers and mothers, the regular people sort of fit in. Because you go to San Diego now, you don't see any vintage toys. You really don't. And if you do, they're Star Wars and they're AFA graded and they're 8.0 or better and they're $15,000. And, so the market is like high end and you'll get somebody who can come in and afford to buy that for $15,000. But it's not like, like where I'd like to be personally. I mean, I like going to New York. I don't set up in New York anymore. It's just too anxiety ridden, and I set up a couple of times, did pretty well. But, you sell shit. I'm at a point where I have to sell things to pay the bills, but I don't like selling anything. I prefer to keep it all.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like that was with that new generation of toy manufacturers. I mean, it really started with McFarlane. When they started making these toy lines specifically for collectors, and you get like McFarlane, NECA, which are these high grade, super detailed stuff. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you do have the Funko Pops, which are just there for kind of that emotional connection to a character, right? And I mean, even with like NECA, you get I want to say they're the company that sells like the diorama backgrounds too, right? So you can set up these like elaborate fight scenes and stuff.
Interestingly enough, NECA is from New Jersey, or they have a warehouse in New Jersey. It could be from New Jersey, and they set up at my monthly show. And they bring in a 24-foot truck filled with their fluff. So anything that they made 10,000 of and only sold 8,000 and they got 2,000 left over, they'll bring and they'll discount. And the one thing I really like, the guys are great guys, but the figures are like, and McFarlane had the same problem. They would make these figures that look great in the package, and if you take them out, they fall apart in your hand. And NECA seems to have, from time to time, they'll have production issues. But it's not to knock the company. I think they do great work. They're at the forefront. We need those companies. Keep moving. They actually bought Loot Crate. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
The NECA bought Loot Crate's warehouse, and they wholesale Loot Crate crap. That's where this hat's from, actually. That's a friggin' that I bought from NECA for $5. I actually bought 3 of them because it's my favorite hat. And But there's a perfect example of me geeking out on a Mr. Robot fucking hat, right? Now somewhere I've got the mask. I got that from them too. But I think that pop culture is an inevitable reality of our cultural existence. The one thing I see shift more than anything, having children, I have a 16-year-old who, he played Pokemon and he played Magic the Gathering, and he's not a big video game guy. But I think those three elements are what are going to sustain pop culture, which means that the toys themselves have sort of, taken the back. The people who, they make toys for 34-year-olds. They don't make toys for 15-year-olds because the 15-year-old market's kind of questionable. Maybe they make Minecraft toys for an 8-year-old, but after 12, they're done. It's just, and, that's the speculative nature of toys in general, but also our society speeding up, where we have, I can sit down and watch anything that I want to watch, period. At any given moment, you sort of circumvent that childhood growing up. Like when I was a kid watching Batman on TV and then playing, going to the local mom and pop store and buying Batman toys, that really sort of hooked me into collecting when I was 8, 9 years old. So I bought my first comic book when I was 10, Amazing Spider-Man 101. And I never forgot that. I still have the copy. But, it's just the world we live in. I would never have thought, if you told me, like I shut my store when I had my second son, and he's going to be 17. So we're going on 17 years since Groove Spot closed. If I had known that the market was going to explode the way it exploded, I would never have shut my store. I mean, back 17 years ago, it made more sense.